Good morning. It's Monday and it's October the 24th. Wanishi Tawanama. Thank you, family, for watching. Uh, Instead of going live, I decided to make this recording. I attended a powwow in Burlington, North Carolina on Saturday, and it was such a good vibe there. And the weather was perfect. I mean, you couldn't ask for better weather, especially in the fall. Um, the fall is my favorite time of year anyway, and I'm just thankful that many gatherings, outdoor events, are now being shifted to the fall because it's more comfortable, I would say. Anyway, what's interesting is that uh, one of my subscribers saw me at this powwow. His first name is Chris. I'm trying to remember his last name. So Chris, when you see this video, do make a comment at the bottom. I don't need to know your last name unless you want to post it, for privacy purposes. But I appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for coming up to me because I'm I am not an extroverted type person. So by you coming up to me, uh, yeah, because I was like, do I know this person? So anyway, thanks for coming up to me and introducing yourself. Again, I appreciate your um nice comments and watching and supporting and things of that nature. I don't know how long you've been a subscriber, but I got a feeling you've been a subscriber for a minute. And you also mentioned that you do genealogy and you're searching and learning. And I believe you said that you drove in from Charlotte. So I don't how far is Charlotte from Burlington? At least 2 hours. Two and a half, yeah, 2.5 hours, I think. Um and I saw a few people out there that also live in Charlotte too. So yeah, it's not a long drive, and it's such a welcoming powwow because not all powwows give off that welcoming feeling, right? But yeah, it was welcoming. I went the last time I went was in 2016. June of 2016 was the last time I went, and something was off. If anybody knows what went down, you know what I'm talking about. But this past weekend there was definitely good energy, and I got a chance to walk down to the village, a short walk from the powwow grounds. And one thing I noticed, and maybe everyone noticed it, but for me, it was a very overwhelming smell of sweetgrass. And I didn't say nothing for like 10, 15 minutes. And then I asked one of my friends, I was like, do you smell a strong scent of sweetgrass? And she was like, yeah, I smell it. I said, I wanted does everyone smell the sweetgrass when they come? Or is it just certain people? And she was like, yeah, it might be just certain people smelling the sweetgrass. But I don't know if sweetgrass was around, like in the, like cut down or something like that in that little area. But behind me is what sweetgrass looks like, when it's braided. That's what sweetgrass looks like. And maybe there was some sweetgrass like nearby, but it was just so strong, right? Um, but yeah, overall, I would say that gathering was it was good. I didn't go on Sunday because I was traveling back. I drove like 4.5 hours to get back to the house on Sunday, so I missed out on that. But I did see some pictures from other people that I'm Facebook friends with. I don't know them personally, but they posted pictures from yesterday, and unfortunately, they weren't there when I was there because they seemed like they were cool people. But they looked like they had a good time. Looked like the weather was perfect yet again. So it was a perfect powwow weekend. Um, There was a part in the intertribal announcement, and the MC, he's not away. His name is Rick. He said, "I want all of the people, blah blah blah, to come in the circle." And he mentioned, Okanichi Saponi. Or he just said Okanichi. Now, just to give you all some background, the Okanichi Saponi band of in North Carolina, they are connected to Virginia as well, but they are state recognized in North Carolina. Okay, but there are connections to Virginians, right? And so when Rick said, all Okanichi, I'm like, okay, he didn't say specifically this particular band. And I saw people going in a circle that are not necessarily enrolled in that band. So I was like, my friend and I, we was like, yeah, we should go in a circle. And she was like, yeah, let's go. So we went in and they took pictures and stuff like that. And they was like, this is what the Okanichi look like. We want everyone to see what, the Okanichi people look like. And again, Okanichi Saponi band of the Saponi Nation. Or Okanichi band of the Saponi Nation. I think that's what they call themselves. Again, in that Hillsboro, Burleson, North Carolina area. They are linked to Virginia. Okay, even though they didn't get state recognized in Virginia, they got state recognized in North Carolina. So you have a few surnames that's linked to the families in North Carolina, but they all link back to Virginia. So that was pretty cool that we got in a circle because we are representing Okanichi. Just we're not enrolled in that particular state recognized tribe, but we wanted to go and support. And my friend and her new family, they drove up from Atlanta. So, and I drove from Maryland. Long story short, I was in Maryland for a few days to take care of a few things near Baltimore. And so Friday, Wednesday, I drove up to Baltimore, which was about 7-hour drive. And I drove down from the Baltimore area to Cary, North Carolina, because that's where I got my hotel, which is an hour away from the powwow grounds. But whatever, it was a new hotel. So I decided to go there. So I drove down from the Owens Mills, Baltimore County area, Maryland, down to Cary. I got down there and let me see, I left. What time did I leave? I feel like I left about 10 a.m. Yeah, and I got to Cary about 3:45, and I stopped twice, to get gas, whatever. And what's interesting is that a few lights on my dashboard came on my way to Baltimore. So I had to find somewhere to get them to diagnose my car as far as like checking the codes and stuff. And yeah, that's something I still have to do because I call all the dealerships that I could find because I have a Volkswagen and nobody could fit me in. Some of them were booked through November the 3rd to figure out what was going on with my car. So I ended up having to go to Jiffy Lube. I got an oil change, got my tires rotated, had to get rear brake pads on my car. So one of them lights had something to do with my rear brakes. Not squeaking or squealing or nothing, but it's just a lot going on with the car. But I'm saying all of this because guess what? I drove from Eastern North Carolina to the Baltimore area in Maryland. From Baltimore, Maryland area down to Cary, North Carolina. From Cary, North Carolina to Burlington, North Carolina. From Burlington back to Cary, because I had the hotel, slept there overnight. And from Cary back to Eastern North Carolina with them lights on. So, according to Jiffy Lube's diagnostic thing, um, there was some stuff going on that was either steering wheel, something, airbag something, and something to do with the rear anti-lock brake thing. And all this, and I'm saying to myself, well, sometimes the lights are on, sometimes they go off. Well, when I drove back from the Baltimore region down to North Carolina, Cary, North Carolina, them lights stayed on the whole time. And then when I left to come back to the house yesterday, them lights stayed on the whole time. So what's going to happen is that I'm going to need to bite the bullet and find authorized certified Volkswagen mechanic somewhere around here, because the closest dealership, Volkswagen dealership, is three and a half hours away. So I'm gonna have to leave my car and probably go back 2 weeks later to go get it or something. And Mr. would just have to take me there, drop me off, all that, just so I can get my car taken care of. So apparently there's something going on with the module. It's like the brain of the car, and it's slowly forgetting how to operate. Basically, it's the computerized stuff that's in cars versus 30 years ago when they didn't have all that BS, in the car. Now you got a lot of electrical stuff. So that's something that's going to have to be done. But I say all of this is because I had a safe trip to Maryland, back down to North Carolina, and any and everything could have happened. But I was meant to be at that powwow. I was meant to spend time with my buddy and her new family, more so her. Yeah, that it was good, Again, I'm not an extroverted type person, so you had a lot of that going on when people first meet people on Facebook, right? Like Facebook friends and stuff like that. I mean, I saw some Facebook friends, but I didn't feel comfortable like giving them hugs, because I'm still doing the whole social distancing thing. People were hugging each other. I'm like, I'm not trying to hug nobody. So, I didn't get to like really spend time with some people that I'm Facebook friends with. And, maybe some people got offended because of my personality, because they're so extroverted and I'm not. And it wasn't meant to be offensive. It's just I need to warm up to you, and then we can go from there, versus let's take a picture, and act like we've known each other in person for years. And you got, like, my buddy, the one that I told you drove up from Atlanta, like when we first met each other, there was this awkwardness. There was this awkwardness between us, and we met each other at a powwow in my hometown, and we were introduced by her cousin. And he thought that we would hit it off or whatever because we're similar or whatever. And so the first time I remember when we met, it was just awkward. And then we exchanged Facebook contact information. And then, she would post things that I thought was interesting or I agree with. And I would post things. And she thought, yeah, we kind of, we somewhat think alike. We somewhat agree with certain things, not everything, but. And then after that, we were like soul sisters for a long time. But it took a while. It took time for us to like warm up to each other. Not just, oh, hey, this is so-and-so, and then automatically we're like peanut butter and jelly. It didn't work that way. So I am hoping that that's not the feeling that some people got. Because I didn't like want to take pictures and do all that. You got to warm up to me. Well, I should say I got to warm up to you. So that's just how that is. Let's see what else. But yeah, overall it was good. Now I did notice that most of the dancers there in the regalia, dressed up in regalia, were, I've never seen them before. I don't know where they came from. It just was a lot of faces, a lot of dancers I've never seen before. Because I just assumed when I went, I was going to see some of the same powwow going type people dancing. And I don't know if whatever happened back in 2016, I'm not going to get into details, but whatever happened, that one powwow, the last one I went to, at the same powwow, whatever happened, I don't know if people still feel a certain kind of way about it, because I did not see them at that powwow, and they probably haven't even gone back. And that's their prerogative if they didn't want to go back for whatever reasons that I'm not going to get into. Let me see what else. So I was meant to be at this powwow despite all of the car thing, and that's something I still need to get on. But I'm safe, I'm back, and again I want to give a shout out to Chris for coming up to me, because like I said, it takes me a while, and I'm very reserved. So when he came up to me, he was like, "Do you have a YouTube channel?" I was like, "Yeah." "Oh, I watch, I'm your subscriber, and I'm also doing genealogy." And I was like, "Oh, okay, you want to take a picture?" That's the only one I took a picture with, someone that I didn't know personally. So that's just tell you something, Chris. Your vibe, instantly, I felt like it was okay to take a picture. So I thank you. And hopefully you had a safe trip back. I'm assuming you did. Not sure if you were there yesterday, but hopefully you really enjoyed yourself. You really connected with people, and you're learning more about how this whole genealogy thing is. One thing that I may consider is hiring a professional genealogist that specializes in people who have Indigenous American and African American ancestry. Because if anybody knows anything about trying to find records when you either didn't come from a wealthy family, and or you were disinherited because you were considered illegitimate or whatever, like somebody in your family did not get the inheritance because of something to do with race, class, whatever, right? You could be related to them, but you didn't get the benefits because you were too dark, hair too curly, whatever you want to call it. So a lot of those records, if you fell in that category, they are all over the place. And it takes a lot of time and effort to get that information and find this paper trail or whatever. So one thing that now in 2022, I reactivated my ancestry.com account. And I have to admit, I'm very impressed at how much is now available, digitalized, available on Ancestry.com, which were not available 10 years ago. I am blown away, because that's going to save me and whoever else that I decide to do the genealogy contract or whatever with. It's going to save a lot of time, because most people back then, they would have to travel a lot and go to these different courthouses and try to go through the microfilms or something to look at the old newspapers and trying to put the pieces together and looking at court records. And some people sued based on something to do with race or land or identification as far as their ethnicity. They fought that type of stuff in court. Finding those records can be daunting and time consuming, and then all that traveling and stuff. But now with sites like Ancestry.com, a lot of that stuff now is available, like through, let's say, the 1960s. I think after 1960s is more difficult to find it online because of privacy, and they have this rule in place, like after so many years this is now available to view or whatever. And if it's too close to now, like within the last 50 years or so, then that type of information you will have to like physically go to vital statistics or the State Department or courthouses, the county courthouses and all of that. So trying to find newspaper clippings, church records. A lot of people say go through church records. Again, it depends on how well the records were kept. And if you come from broke and just trying to survive, a lot of that stuff is not going to be documented properly. But I've said this before in some old videos, but I think it's a good idea to pay attention to the slave records. And when I say slave records, for the most part, those records are associated with Africans, black folks, right? However, in these same records, they list indigenous American people, East Indian people, okay, which probably came from the West Indies, right, in the Caribbean, right? They, well, at least in the state of Virginia, they had people who were indentured servants. All of that stuff listed in slave records. So this is a little clue, a little bit of a something that could help you kind of get around that wall, right? Is looking through slave records. And I will also go as far as looking at slave records based on the slaveholder's surname, because many people took on the surname of their former slave holder's name, right? Now in those records they may say the first name and say the age sometimes, or they may just say the age of the person. So that could be, that can be a little frustrating, but at least you have something. Like my great grandmother on my mother's side, so my mother's paternal great grandmother, okay, my mother's father's mother's mother, she was a midwife, and that could be interpreted in so many different ways. But she was a midwife, and she was born a slave, and they did a newspaper article on her back home, and I got a copy of it, and it spelled out who she worked for. And she worked on the Presswood plantation, and I believe the surname of the slave owner there was Towns. That was the surname. And she continued to work for him, right? As well as being the community's midwife. So she was respected quite a bit in that community. But again, I mentioned the newspaper clipping because within the newspaper clipping, it mentioned who she worked for. And that was a slave plantation. So it is possible that she was a slave at that particular plantation. It's possible. And my mother told me there was talk that one of the lady I'm talking about, the midwife, one of her daughters could pass for white, and when she was old enough, she moved away and never came back, and nobody ever talked about her again. Her name was Mariah. And of course, this is a common theme within some families where people, their genetic is kind of leaning towards the more European look. And so they're able to get out of bondage psychologically, and, you know, the environment that was created to suppress people, right? They're able to escape that. And she escaped it and never came back. But it's sad, but that does happen. So, yeah, newspaper clippings. That's basically what I got, that information about her. And I have a picture of her. That picture was shared with some of my relatives, distant relatives, through Facebook. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is a gold mine. So, you know, I screenshot it or whatever. Ever so often, I'll call her out, you know, on my page. Like, this is my great-great-great-grandmother. You know, she was a midwife and, you know, blah, 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 blah. And so I love having that picture of her, because many people who descend from some type of slave, right? Even if it's one person, right? It's rare to have a picture of them. It's rare to have someone who was born into it, and the rest, you know, rest of their lives, they're free, right? But they're able to tell you how life was when they were enslaved. That's a big deal. And I'm going to kind of like transition now and talk about this documentary I just watched called Descendants on Netflix. It's called Descendants, and it's on Netflix now. And it's about this community called Africa Town down in Mobile, Alabama. And this particular community are descendants of one of the last illegal African slave ships. And it was in 1860 when those slaves were brought from Africa. And being that it was illegal, the slaveholder burned the boat, right, the ship, to kind of get rid of the evidence, because it was illegal to do that, like bringing Africans via ship from Africa. Like, you could still trade or sell or impregnate a slave to make more slaves or whatever, because that's what happened too. But in 1808, I believe, is when slavery by transport through ship, you know, from Africa became illegal. But from 1808 through 1865 is when the act of enslaving people was still, you know, going on. It wasn't illegal. But to ship them straight from Africa was illegal after 1808. And so the name of the ship was called Kalita. I might be butchering it, right? But I suggest you check out Descendants, okay? It was moving, it was touching, and it's one of many stories out there, one of many experiences out there with descendants of African slaves, right? But what's unique about this is that these slaves came over in 1860. They were only enslaved for about 5 years. So they still remembered where they came from. And they were able to pass that down to their descendants, right? And they knew what freedom was. A lot of the slaves within that region were born into it, so they didn't understand the essence of like real freedom. So one of the last living survivors / former slaves that was linked to that ship, there was talks of him crying for days. Strong man, right? But he cried for days because he missed home so much. And by him missing home so much, and others that were also on that ship, they eventually created a community. And again, they called it Africa Town, but they created a community versus those who were born into enslavement and not really knowing how to set up something like that, because they were brought up to be property, didn't know anything about ownership and all of that. So it's a very intriguing documentary. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's environmental issues going on. For whatever reason, a lot of industrial facilities were built around this town, pumping all kinds of chemicals in the air, in the water. People dying left and right from cancer-related issues that's linked to the poison that's being spewed out there. They would not dare have something like that in a more affluent area, right? So these people have been diagnosed with all kinds of cancer, and a lot of people already died from it. And it's linked to the toxic waste and the toxic air that these people are exposed to on a daily basis. So again, check out Descendants on Netflix. Descendants, okay? And the only reason why I knew about it, because with Netflix, they'll sometimes on the home screen, they'll show you a trailer or something that just, was added to Netflix, something that's new or whatever like that. But this particular documentary was kind of I had to look for it. Let's just put it that way. So you may have to look for it. I mean, I guess unless it gets a lot of views and a lot of people do the 2 thumbs up, because there's an option there where you can do 2 thumbs up, then maybe it will get momentum, and then you'll be able to see it the top 10 or whatever. But anyway, I checked that out yesterday and I was moved by it, and I would suggest you guys do that too. And again, these are descendants from people that were directly sent from Africa. There was no stopping in the Caribbean and all that. No, it was directly from Africa. I think, was it Benin? I'm trying to remember the exact country. But from that particular country in Africa, straight to Mobile, Alabama. So there's no confusion and all that. Where they stopped, where they port, who they picked up, who they dropped off, none of that. It was straight to that country in Africa, to Mobile, Alabama. So they have a direct line to Africa. Not a whole lot of confusion when it comes to that. A lot of people who are very much interested in their African ancestry, right? Their ethnicity and stuff like that. They may do the DNA test, and the DNA test may give you hints to where the people came from based on your genetic pool and which African tribe you may be linked to, right? But DNA tests do not reveal everything. It just gives you a snapshot of what they found in the pool of your genetics. So, something may pop up, but just knowing this particular group of people have a direct line from 1860. We ain't talking about the 1500s. We ain't talking about the 1600s, right? We're talking about 1860. 1860. So that's something special. That really is something special. And a curator from the Museum of the African American. I may be butchering that too, but it's part of the Smithsonian in DC. She actually traveled down to Mobile, Alabama, and she's trying to help the community there, Africa Town, create space, museum kind of level, tourism kind of level, for this community. So yeah, that was good. So again, if you're into genealogy and you enjoy history and you enjoy just ancestor type stuff, right? I think you will enjoy it. There's a part in this documentary where one of the descendants mentioned ancestors and mentioning the graveyard there. And I mean, they didn't really talk too much about spirituality and religion or whatever, right? They didn't talk about all that. But the guy was dropping some hints. The guy was dropping some gems. And he mentioned graveyard, he mentioned ancestors, he mentioned ghost stories. But he didn't make it into something like scary. But he basically was saying he was brought up visiting the graveyards, the graveyard, right? Visiting the cemetery where all those people, known and unknown, that link back to that country in Africa, and the descendants of those people that have passed on. And he mentioned ancestors. Your ancestors going to speak to you. If your ancestors have this kind of history, they're going to speak to you. And so I was like, okay. I was like, okay. Because if you link back to that country in Africa, some of those belief systems was passed down to those descendants. 1860, right? 1860, some of those belief systems, spirituality or whatever, probably was passed down. And there's this one lady, I forgot her name or whatever, but I think she's a big part of the community there as far as speaking on the behalf of the community. And there was some old VHS videos that they were playing of people like talking about their experience as a descendant of one of the Africans that were enslaved. You know, they had already passed on, but there was a project going on where some of the younger members of the community wanted to record the older members of the community's experiences and thoughts and memories of their parents who were enslaved, right, before they died. And so one of the ladies, she was wearing all white. And when I think of all white and you have your hair wrapped and all of that, when I think of that, when I see someone who is African American, or linked to Africa in some kind of way, and they're wearing all white, the first thing I think of is Yoruba. I think of your Orishas. I think of Ifa. I think of, things that are linked to Africa as far as belief systems. So again, they didn't talk a whole lot about that, but I'm just like looking and I'm connecting the dots and stuff like that. And I'm sure privately amongst themselves, they learned and kept on passing down to their community some spirituality or some spiritual connection. Because I didn't hear a whole lot about belief systems and all of that. It was kind of like hinting around with some of that stuff. And again, it's Mobile, Alabama, so they probably don't want to talk too much about their beliefs, spirituality, and all that, because they wanted to keep the documentary focused on the descendants of these Africans that were stolen or whatever and brought over here in 1860. So I suggest to give it a watch, and hopefully you'll give it 2 thumbs up. Let me see what else. So I talked about the powwow, talked about records, genealogy, the descendants, which, you know, is part of genealogy, right? Let's see. I'm seriously considering next month going to the Pocahontas Reframed Festival. It's a film festival. I'm thinking about going to that. I don't know if I'm going to any other like powwows or anything the rest of the year. I don't feel a need to go. I like going to spend a little time with, you know, friends and associates and stuff like that, because half the time it's kind of like a family reunion. That's when you get to see them and spend time with them, whatever like that. So I mean, basically when I do go to a powwow at this point in life, that's what I'm doing. It's just catching up with people. That's about it. But I don't think I'll be going to any powwows the rest of the year. But like I said, next month in Richmond, there is the Pocahontas Reframed Film Festival. You can Google that if you want to know more about that. A few people I know that are cool have gone over the years, and I've never gone. I've never experienced it. So I think this year I might do that. It's not a powwow or anything like that, and it's more deeper, you know, as far as representation and all of that. I am planning on going down to South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, in January of next year, and it is the grand opening of the International African History Museum. It might be called something else, but it's like International African something Museum, and this is their grand opening. And when I was in Charleston a year ago, I mentioned certain things about my experience there, like what I observed or whatever like that. And I did do a quick video on the site where the slaves were imported and exported, like hundreds of thousands of people, okay? So that's the location that is where the museum is going to be, or is, because they're working on it. Right on the spot where the slaves were imported and exported. Now, when I say export, most of that is indigenous American people. And you don't hear a lot about indigenous American people being exported to different places as slaves. You had people exported to Bermuda, to the West Indies, to different parts of Europe, and even Africa, guys. You had indigenous people enslaved and exported to different countries. Now, we hear a lot about Africa, right? We do hear a lot about Africa imported, right? But as far as exporting, yeah, indigenous American people were also exported and dispersed, right? So I find it interesting because when I did my DNA test, I don't know, probably at least 10 years ago, there's this country called, is it Equatorial Guinea? I may be mispronouncing it. It is on the west coast. I mean, yeah, west of Africa, western coast of Africa, or West Africa, I should say. But apparently they have people from America, indigenous people from America, that were sent there as slaves. And I'm sitting there thinking like, could I possibly be getting connections or hits with that particular country because of my indigenous American connection as well? Even though it's saying Africa, but there were indigenous American people sent to Africa as slaves. Yeah, that had me thinking too. Um, Again, I could be mispronouncing the country, but it starts with an E, okay? In West Africa. Equatorial Guinea. And see, I'm freestyling because I'm not in front of my computer or whatever. Um, but yeah, so that's interesting if that could be why I'm linking up to that particular country. It's because there were indigenous American people enslaved and sent over there to that country. Never know. That could be the case. Let me see what else. So I'm looking forward to that. I haven't booked any hotels or whatever yet, but that's what I want to do. I did drive down there last time with the help of Mr. Um, if Mr. don't go, I'm still going, and I'm still gonna drive and probably stay at the same hotel I stayed at before, which is in downtown Charleston. It's like it's not right in downtown where all the touristy people are, but it's close enough where they have free shuttle buses. And you could take the shuttle bus to the main kind of spot near the water. I'm trying to remember what it's called, but the shuttle bus will take you there. And then from there, you can take the local city bus to different spots. And it'll drop you off. So, and that's free. So, a free shuttle from the hotel to that main bus stop, and then taking the free bus to the museum. And the reason why I'm thinking about that, because there is a parking garage there at the museum, because there's like an aquarium and all that there. But I'm thinking on grand opening day, I probably have to like park my car there overnight or something the day before, and then catch a cab to the hotel, and then catch a shuttle, and then that bus free back over there. So when the grand opening thing is done, I can just take my car and drive away or whatever. I don't know, because the parking garage is not free. So I'm still kind of figuring all that out, if that's what I'm gonna do. But I actually like Charleston. I don't know if I would want to live there, but I appreciate what I've learned about that area, because it links to so many people. It's not just Charleston. That was one of the main ports that imported and exported slaves. So that's why I'm also connected to it on a deeper level, is because of that exportation and that importation, right? It's a big deal. I wouldn't be surprised if some heavy lifters, if like the Barack Obama type folks and the Obamas showing up, okay? I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there would be some celebrities there. I wouldn't be surprised. And I'm not going there because of that, but I also was thinking about that too. Like, okay, if I go to this thing and this grand opening or whatever, it might be more chaotic because of these well-known, influential people showing up. So I have to take that in consideration, because I didn't go to the grand opening of the African American Museum in DC on the mall, part of the Smithsonian. I didn't go, but it was a lot of, and I mean, it's DC. I get it. I mean, the nation's capital. I get it. That's probably why it was like, Oprah Winfrey was there, and just so many influential people showed up for the opening. And it could possibly be the same kind of energy there at the grand opening in Charleston. So I'm also considering that too, like how more complicated it could be to actually be there in person with all that going on. It could be more restricted and all of that because of certain people showing up. I don't know. But that's what I'm planning on doing. I'm planning on going to that. Because to me, that's part of respecting that part of my ancestry. And it's not just Africa, even though they're going to make it all about Africa, but it's not just Africans being enslaved. And I'm hoping that this particular museum will actually have an exhibit or something that also talks about Indigenous American enslavement and how many of them were exported out of that port to faraway lands. And I don't know, maybe I'm the person that's supposed to speak up about that. I don't know. Maybe I'm supposed to contact the museum and whatever. I'm not an expert when it comes to that information, but I've read a lot of documents with people who actually know a lot about that part of history. So I don't know if the museum should be connecting with those folks, or whatever. I don't know. But Indigenous American slavery did happen. And one thing that I've learned also is that I believe in 1705 or either 1750, if an Indigenous American person, was someone who was captured during a battle with another Indigenous American group, because it happened, and they would be prisoners of war. If they were prisoners of war of some other tribal group, by either 1705 or 1750, they were considered slaves, which equal you're black. If you were Indigenous American and you were also enslaved, you eventually on paper became a black person, a person of color, a mulatto, or whatever you want to call it. I was like, what? So you're just gonna change somebody's identity because they were enslaved to black? Really? This went down in Virginia, y'all. So a lot of us who are looking in our genealogy, most of us are kind of in the 1800s searching, but it's kind of hard to get past the 1800s and you're in the 1700s and stuff like that. But again, if an Indigenous American person was a prisoner of war, they were automatically put into enslavement, right? And eventually, on paper, they became black, color, person of color, mulatto, negro, depending on the census taker, depending on the decade. That's what it was. So a lot of these so-called African black slaves could possibly be Indigenous American. Eventually, once it trickled down to your great grandparents' generation or something like that, depending on your age, right? See, my paternal grandfather was born in 1900. Okay, so if he was still alive today, he'll be 122 years old. That's my grandfather. My grandmother was born in 1905. So I probably will have to go back at least 3-4 greats removed or whatever to find records that said something about Indigenous American or whatever like that. As far as enslavement, right? So I'm just saying, look in the 1700 records. Look in the enslavement records in the 1700s. and you will see what I'm talking about. You will see what I'm talking about. This is where you get a lot of the confusion. You get a lot of confusion in these records. Well, say, oh, we black for about 5 generations. Okay. It's possible, right? It's possible because over the years, you did some intermixing and you kind of, you fell in the category of being black or whatever, because now you've had so many, intermixing or whatever. Now you consider yourself black, right? You've been so far removed from the indigenous ethnicity, the culture and customs and stuff like that, that now with all the intermixing, I understand. But if you're going back in the records, you're probably going to find indigenous American ancestors that were enslaved that on paper became black. Okay? Before the 1700s, they may have listed people down, as, in Indian, in Virginia, they used the term Indian, right? But yeah, I'm speaking from a Virginian mindset. I'm from Virginia. Okay. I don't live in Virginia anymore, but I was born and raised in Virginia. Okay. My folks are from Virginia and North Carolina. So a lot of those records, if you keep going back and keep going back and keep going back, eventually that magical Indian word will probably pop up. But just know, don't be discouraged because that Indian person turned into a black person when they became enslaved. So don't overlook the African slave records. That's my point after talking about 20 minutes about these records. Don't overlook the African slave records, the black slave records, the Negro slave records, the colored slave records. Indentured servants, too, fell into the slave records under African, even though they could have been, a European ethnic group or whatever who happened to be indentured servants. They put them in those records. African slave records. I'm not lying. Indentured servitude, okay, are also part of the records that were kept in Virginia for enslaved people. And like I said, there were East Indians enslaved in Virginia. And I'm probably going to link that to the West Indies because there were quite a few East Indians that ended up in the West Indies. So that makes sense. If they've been, if they're picking up slaves from the West Indies and then, importing them at Charleston's, port or somewhere down in Louisiana or somewhere like that, right? Or Alabama or something. Like, it makes sense that they will also have enslaved people in the West Indies and bringing them into the United States. Well, now the United States, but you know what I mean. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind, because a lot of people overlook anything that's linked to black folks when it comes to trying to find the Native American ancestry. But it's intertwined, guys. It is intertwined on the East Coast. And specifically, I'm talking about Virginia and probably North Carolina too, right? Let me see what else. What else do I want to share with you guys? Because I'm back on the genealogy bandwagon again. I haven't talked about it in a long time, guys. Because I've been talking about other things that have been taking priority. But I've been bit by the bug again, the genealogy bug, guys. I've been bit by the genealogy bug again. Okay, it's been again like a decade. It's been a decade since I really was talking about it. But now I am in a space where I want to, and again, Ancestry.com has made it a lot easier, and they give you hints, these little leaves, right? This little leaf, green leaf, those are hints that you have in your account at the top of the bar. Uh, People who also have family trees that may be linked to you, they're sharing their family tree. Some people keep it private, and I still don't understand that whole thing. That's just like people holding on to all the family pictures and don't want to show the pictures to their first cousin or whatever because they're so scared somebody's going to take their picture. This happened in my family too. So it's not like this doesn't happen to, everybody. But it's that same mentality. It's like, okay, I understand it took you 20 years to gather all this information. Why do you feel the need that everybody else should take 20 years in some to do some of the same research that you already have? Like, to me, that's so selfish. That is so selfish. Like, if I have information, I'm going to share the information. What does it matter if you spent 20 years gathering this information and this person only spent a week and got the information? Who cares? Just like your great-great-grandparents, they probably were farm hands. And you now are a computer programmer sitting at a damn computer making 20 times, if not 100 times more than they ever could even dream of in their life. Do you think they're mad at you because you're their descendant and you making all this money and don't even have to like sweat? I think not. It's called progress. It's called progress. But yeah, you still have people that are very selfish with information. Now, part of that is because some people are trying so hard to get some kind of benefit financially. And if they can take, let's say, the surname Smith, which is very common, and claim, oh, I'm connected to this group, because my grandma's surname, maiden name was Smith. Well, that may not be the same Smiths, okay? It's a very common name. And maybe some people are like piggybacking on someone else's family tree. That does happen, and I get it. But everyone is not doing that. If I see a Smith or Harris or whatever Jones on my family tree, I'm not going to automatically think that it's the same Jones on that family tree. However, with the with the public family trees that people are sharing on Ancestry, if I see Willie Ann Towns on my tree around the same time, and it's the same household of people, the same names, they may spell them a little differently, right? But it's the same household. Those are my relatives too. The same people. And this family tree happens to have a few more records that I didn't discover yet. And they're sharing this information. That's helping me. And mine is public. Like, okay, if you see your uncle on my family tree and your uncle is my first cousin, okay, that's your people. No one's lying. Oh, well, they're not related to me. They're in-laws. They're not blood or whatever like that. That happens. I get it. That's how you're related to that person because that person over there married into the family. So your blood relative married into a family. That's how you're connected to this particular line of people. I get that too. I get that. But at the same time, why stop somebody from searching? Because you have this coveted family tree. Probably got something to do with tribal benefits or something like that. And you so scared that somebody else is going to be able to get some of that pie. Honestly, if that's the outcome from all of my research, fine, whatever. But I'm not waiting around for that. I'm not waiting around for a check or whatever like that. Because guess what? I belong to a community that I don't have to prove on paper which country in Africa that I descend from. They have programs, scholarships, and grants for me and people that look like me. My gender. There's a laundry list of grants and scholarships out there for people like that. It's not like I come from white privilege and there's no special grant or program for white privilege. But daggone well, there's a lot of grants and scholarships and programs and support system or whatever, if you look for it, for people that are considered minorities. So that's not the goal. Now, if that happens to be remnants of all of this research that I'm doing, fine. But that's not the goal. It's not. Like, I literally would love to buy back land. I've said this before. Buy back. Now, again, if you go back to what I was talking about with the Netflix documentary called Descendants, one of the ladies spoke and she said she was taught to never sell the land because they found out if you have land, you have a voice. Again, she said that she was taught not to sell the land because when you have land, you have a voice. And so I'm interested in buying land where I'm from and doing something special with it. I'm not going to get into too much about what I would like to do with that land, but I want to establish on that land. That's what I want to do. And it takes money. And I'm sure there are grants and everything out there that ain't got nothing to do with being Indigenous American, right? But this is something that could possibly happen within the next 10 years, right? Maybe even sooner than that, because I did play the lottery. So, but there's this property where I'm from that's like 52 acres of land. And there's already like an old house on this property. Like an old, I think this house probably was at least 100 years old or whatever. So there's history there on this property. But I can just envision buying this 52 acres of land and establishing it in so many different ways. Back home. Now, I do have property that eventually I will inherit, and basically was told, don't sell it. Don't sell it. The house is already on the property that I grew up in. I was told, you can fix it up. That could be like a family house or whatever with people who come home for family reunions. They can stay there, whatever, or one of y'all can stay in there. I mean, I don't necessarily want to live in the house I grew up in because, it's so small. But this will be a home for family for generations. That's the goal. I would also like to buy the property surrounding this land that I'm going to inherit one day. That's like the wooded area. Now, this property behind my dad's property or parcel of land is owned by people that their surname is Smith, and they happen to be so-called white people. So I've looked online to see if it's for sale or whatever like that, and it's not for sale. It's just they own the property and not doing anything with it. So, and it's, I don't know how far back the property goes, but it's a big chunk of land. I would love to like own that property, and it kind of goes downhill a little bit because it's not too far from that. It's the lake. Because I live near a big lake. But anyway, these are just things and ideas that I'm thinking about. Not too far from what the property I'm talking about. Some people might be familiar with the National Black Farmers Association. You might be. John Boyd is like the president of it or whatever like that. His wife is the president of the Native American Farmers Association. So they kind of have two organizations going on at one time. And she is Lumbee. I think she's from North Carolina. But anyway, you got this black man, you got this Native American woman, and they own this farm, and I think they grow hemp and some other things too. And one thing about hemp, you can use hemp for fabric, right? Like cotton, you can use hemp for that. You can use hemp for protein if are a vegetarian or something like that. You can put that in. You can put hemp protein powder in your smoothies and stuff like that. Hemp can be used to make rope. You can make rope out of hemp because it's hard and tough enough to do that. It doesn't take forever for hemp to grow, so you can harvest it. And I'm not a farmer, but this is what I've been learning. Like, you can harvest hemp more frequently than other crops. And I was thinking of like solar panels, like a solar farm, just all kinds of things that people want to get up in age. They want to be closer to the earth. They want to, have their hands in the dirt. They want to grow things. I'm kind of getting in that stage where I actually want to grow something like outside I have rosemary bushes, right? But I want to grow things that I can harvest. So you can harvest rosemary. But again, this is something that the older I get, the more I recognize and I respect ownership of land. And I'm thinking about all these different places I've stayed, and it's all about work and, career and everything like that. And most people don't stay there until they're retired and all of that. They move away. They were just there just to make money, to build a savings and stuff like that. And then they just either go back home or they go somewhere that's, more affordable and it's a slower pace. And where I live is a slower pace. I'm not necessarily in retirement mode right now, but I would not mind living somewhere where there's plenty of space and land. And now that I think about it, like I'm staying in a very small kind of community. And when you're kind of like an outsider. And not just my skin color, right? But just like you're not part of this community because you weren't raised here. And in certain areas, that's how you feel. When you go to a small town or village or whatever, if you weren't raised there, you don't feel connected to the area. Some people might try to be nice or whatever to try to make you feel welcome, but deep down, you don't feel like that's home, deep down. And so, again, I'm looking at just property just for sale where I'm from. Because where I'm from, it's like an hour from the airport. It's like 30 minutes from a major highway. 30 minutes basically to go shopping in places you want to shop at. Like if I wanted to go to a mall or something like that, it might be an hour, hour drive or whatever. Most of that is in North Carolina. If as far as where I would want to go to shop or something like that, it doesn't take long to get to Durham and stuff like that. Because I'm from right on the border of Southern Virginia. That's where I'm from. Versus where I am now, it's like the closest damn Chipotle is 3.5 hours, guys. 3.5 hours to get to the closest Chipotle. If I was back home and I went to the closest Chipotle, I would get there in like 45 minutes. Like less than an hour. Yes, that sounds still like a lot of driving, but I would prefer to be west of Highway 95. If you guys are familiar with Interstate 95, you know how it kind of takes you from, I don't know, New York City all the way down to Florida. I would want to be on the west side of Highway 95. I don't want to be on the east side because I'm on the east of 95, and it literally takes me 3.5 hours driving north and west to get to Highway 95. I mean, Interstate 95. And then once I'm on 95, I can really make good time. You know, I can really travel and just get down the road. But to get to Highway Interstate 95, it takes about 3.5 hours from here. And to me, that just really sucks up a lot of time to get where I'm going. But whatever. I don't travel as much, but when I do need to travel, I always like, oh, I could have got there like 2 hours earlier if I was on 95 or close to it. But so yeah, so I work from home, and so that's why I have more flexibility to live wherever. Now, I don't live alone, obviously. You know, there's Mr. And the reason why I'm here is because Mr. felt the desire to be here. So I'm kind of here because of him. But eventually, I will not be here anymore. And I would much rather be in the Piedmont region, okay, of this state. I mean, I've thought about Virginia, like I mentioned, where I'm from, but it probably will make more sense to stay in this state. But again, west of Highway 95. So if I want to go to Richmond or go to DC, go to Atlanta, well, Atlanta's on the 85 South part. But I mean, the point is, it'll be a lot quicker to get places between DC and Georgia, right? It would just be a lot quicker to get to places. So, but anyway, that's what I have planned for the first month in January of next year. And doing some research behind the scenes, not just from my family, but also connecting with other people that have the same mindset when it comes to this genealogy, family tree type stuff. And one of my buddies, and I might have mentioned this earlier in this video, one of my buddies is she hired a genealogist. Yeah, I think I did mention that. I think. So I'm seriously considering hiring the same person to save me some time. Yeah, I think, yeah, that's probably what I end up doing. Because I love the research, but sometimes you do hit brick walls with this type of research. And when you hit walls like that, it pays to have someone, if you have the dividends, right? It pays to get someone to do a lot of the heavy lifting. It does. And the cost, I think it's between $600 and $800. And based on my buddy, she said that he well, it would take a year because he's doing other stuff too. It's not just her, but it would take up to a year to do all of the genealogy searches and stuff like that. But you know, he probably could find, I mean, come on now. I was doing this whole genealogy stuff back in 2004, 2005. I really started getting serious about it. And and then I got the Ancestry account, and then I deactivated it like in the early 2010s. And so now it's 10 years later, and now I've reactivated again. Like, if it's only going to take him a year, and if you compare that to all that time I've been really like paying attention off and on with my genealogy and my family tree and stuff, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. I think if you have the dividends, yes, a lot of people, they get DNA tests and everything, because I was one of them. But it's also refreshing to have something that you can, that's tangible as well. And when it comes to Indigenous American, I'm talking about USA, American folks, having something tangible has more weight when it comes to claiming something, right? But I don't feel the need to do all of that. For me personally, I don't feel the need to do all of that. But if you have kids, some people are concerned about their children's exposure and learning about the history and ceremonies and stuff like that. And in some groups, you can't participate in a lot of private gatherings and stuff because you're not a member, right? So some people are thinking about their kids and their descendants after them and trying to have them connected deeper, not just going to a powwow and dancing in a tribal, right? But something deeper, more deeper connection with a group that's very tight knit. And if they're recognized by the powers that be here in this country, then they have to be real picky with who they decide they want to be a member of their group. And some of their groups are very strict about you, representing some other racial group. You got to be all about the red road. In many cases, you have to be all about the red road, and that's it, in public. Because they feel like it will be detrimental for the entire group if some people are saying, yeah, I have this in my family too, and da da da. It's like, don't say that publicly. Don't say that publicly. Because if you say that publicly, it's going to make us all look like we're illegitimate. So you have a lot of that going on. And as you know, guys, I am African Indigenous American, okay? That's who I am. I'm not going to pick and choose. I said this from day one. I'm not going to pick and choose, okay? Based on phenotype or high cheekbones or whatever you want. No, I'm not doing that, okay? I'm not going to dishonor certain ancestors because they don't fit the bill. I'm not doing that. This is a completion of who I am. You don't do that. You don't. This is all of me. All of me, okay? We ain't gonna play stupid in public. Okay? With this hair, right? This skin color and all that. We ain't gonna play stupid in public. Playing mind games in public. We're not doing that. No one's stupid. Just because you said you are X, Y, Z, no one's stupid. You ain't fooling everybody. Culturally, you could say I'm whatever, culturally. But when you talk about genetics and ethnicity, no. I'm not excluding certain ancestors out of my identity. That's not going to happen. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. And some people leave it. Because like I said, take it or leave it. This is me. I can't erase certain things in my DNA. My genetics. My ancestors. What you see, my ancestors are looking right back at you. Looking right back at you. I am a reflection of them. I am a reflection of my ancestors in me. So no, we're not playing that game. We're not. Now I have noticed the younger generation, those in their 20s, okay? Maybe late teens, but definitely in their 20s, who are enrolled members of some of these recognized tribes, and they're talking about their mixed ancestry. Now, I don't know if this is a trend. This could be a trend like, okay, where there are a small percentage of our members who are mixed. So if you're already a member, like one of your parents are already enrolled, you were born, so now you all automatically enrolled. That kind of situation. So they can speak freely at this point in time that they have mixed ancestry. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, their mouth probably would have been washed out with soap. Like, how dare you say anything outside of us being Indian? You don't speak that in public. That's our business. You don't say that in public. That's not their business. You about to mess up what we got going on here. But now I'm noticing there's a trend, and I can appreciate it. Like, you have the newer generations like, yeah, you know, my dad is this, my mom is that. My mom is enrolled. I'm enrolled. I was born into this. I was raised in this. Okay. So being that I was raised and born in this and I'm enrolled or whatever, now I can say that, oh yeah, we also, in my particular family, we're mixed with X, Y, and Z. And ain't nobody gonna just take the enrollment away because it's already on the wall, right? The records are already there. So just because this person's one parent is this and the other one's that, they're not gonna be like, oh, well, you're not a member. I mean, you're not one of us. No, that person is part of your family who happen to have a relative, like a parent, one of the parents or whatever, or grandparent that was not Native American, Indigenous American. So kudos to those. I'm not calling you out, calling your name, but I know who you are. You know who I am. And I have respect for you, what you're doing. I appreciate it. Because like I said, 20, 25, 30 years ago and back, yeah, you would have been shunned for even speaking. God forbid if it's a black person in that family and you're related to that person. God forbid if you said anything about that being your first cousin and y'all related by blood. Because, you know, apparently having black ancestry, African ancestry, sub-Saharan African ancestry, apparently, at least in the state of Virginia, will disqualify you and your group, if it's too many of y'all looking like this, would disqualify you from having that Indigenous American ancestry. It's dumb, it's stupid, it's psychotic, and it's ignorant. That's how I feel about it. Okay? But anyway, even though this is not a live, but I feel like I'll probably be getting some comments. And again, kudos to Chris, meeting you at the powwow Saturday in Burlington, North Carolina. It was an honor to meet you. It was a treat. And again, thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. Thank you to all the OGs that's been watching my channel forever. Thank you for being patient with me with regards to not speaking too much about genealogy and stuff over the years, because that's just not where my headspace was. Mine was more towards health, wellness, spirituality, and things of that nature. And I spoke a bit about work too, right? Because, you know, finances affect your livelihood. So anyway, at this point in life, I'm in a space where I can like redirect my energy back into genealogy and things of that nature. So anyway, be blessed and be a blessing to others. Until next time, toodles.